Let's talk about this because some of you all been losing your minds trying to figure out why an avoidant acts the way they do once you stop chasing. Now listen, I'm going to tell you this in plain talk. The minute you stop running after them, you flip the whole script and they don't even know what to do with themselves. See, avoidants are used to one thing: control. They like to keep you dangling like a fish on a hook. Not too close, not too far, just enough so you're always wondering where you stand. They're not used to you breaking that pattern. They're not used to you saying, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to go live my life. And when that happens, oh, trust me, they feel it. At first, they're going to act like they don't notice. They'll pretend they're unbothered, scrolling their phone, living their life like nothing happened. But deep down, that ego starts itching. They start wondering, hold up, why isn't she blowing up my phone? Why isn't he sending me good morning text anymore? That silence hits different. Next thing you know, they start doing these little breadcrumb moves. A random text out of nowhere. Hey, you okay? They'll accidentally, like one of your posts from 6 months ago. That's not an accident, baby. That's them testing the waters. They want to see if you'll jump back in and start chasing again. But here's the real thing. When you stop chasing, you take away their power. And avoidance? They don't like losing control, so they start switching up their whole behavior. Some will get more attentive. Some will try to reel you back in with sweet talk. And some will even get upset, acting like you did something wrong just because you stopped playing their game. And I'm telling you, that's when you got to stand your ground. Because the moment you break the chase, you finally see their real self. You see if they're willing to step up and meet you halfway, or if they were only ever comfortable when they had you on a leash. So when you stop chasing, remember this? It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of you finding out who's real, who's playing, and who can't handle someone who knows their worth. And baby, once you know your worth, you don't run after nobody. They run after you. If you want, I can also make you a more extended Steve Harvey style version of this speech with even more personality and comedic timing so it feels like a live show. Do you want me to make it longer and more animated? When you stop chasing an avoidant, the very first thing they're going to do is act like they don't even notice. They'll walk around like nothing in the world has changed, like your absence or your silence doesn't even register on their radar. They'll keep their facial expressions calm, their body language relaxed, their routine untouched, because in their mind, they believe that the more they act unbothered, the more control they keep. This is a defense mechanism for them, a way to protect their ego from feeling rejected or vulnerable. Avoidants thrive on the illusion of independence and control, so the last thing they want to do is show you that they've been affected by your decision to step back. But the thing is, no matter how smooth they try to play it, that ego of theirs starts to itch. The human mind can only ignore a change in behavior for so long before curiosity creeps in. They start to wonder why the daily dynamic has shifted, why your attention isn't flowing toward them like it used to. They may not say anything at first, but internally, they are replaying past conversations, checking the last messages you sent, and looking for signs of what might have caused the change. Even if they never admit it out loud, they notice the absence of your voice, your energy, your effort. That's when little insecurities begin to pop up in their mind, no matter how confident or detached they try to appear. The quiet starts to get louder in their head because avoidants are used to people accommodating their emotional distance, not challenging it. They're used to you leaning in when they pull away, so when you don't, it flips their usual script upside down. The part they don't expect is how your silence starts working on like a slow burn, making them question their own worth and desirability without them realizing it. Even if they tell themselves they prefer space, they also secretly thrive on the reassurance that comes from someone chasing them, because it feeds their sense of importance. Without that, they're left with their own thoughts, and those thoughts begin to circle around you. They may keep their poker face, but their mind is working overtime, wondering what you're doing, who you're talking to, and why you aren't giving them the same energy as before. This mental shift is the first crack in their emotional wall, and though they may still try to mask it with nonchalance, it's the moment they begin to truly feel the shift in power between you and them. After that initial phase of pretending they don't notice, avoidants often move in a subtle testing mode. And this is where they start sending out little signals to see if you'll bite. They might not come right out and say they miss you or want to talk, because that would require vulnerability they're not comfortable showing, but they'll drop breadcrumbs in your path hoping you'll pick them up. This could be something as small as liking one of your old posts on social media, not a new one, but one from months back, which is a calculated move to make you think about without them having to say a word. They might send you a random message out of the blue that has no real purpose, like "Hey," or "How you been?" or even something silly or unrelated to reopen the line of communication without making it seem like they're chasing you. Sometimes they'll bring up an inside joke from the past, a shared memory, or a random question they could have easily Googled just to get you talking again. What they're really doing here is gauging your reaction. If you respond quickly and warmly, it confirms to them that you're still available and emotionally invested, which puts the control back in their hands. If you take your time or give short answers, it makes them uneasy because it signals the dynamic has shifted and you might be under their influence anymore. The breadcrumbing is a safe strategy for them because it allows them to re-engage without risking too much of their pride or exposing themselves to rejection. They can always pretend it was nothing if you don't respond the way they hoped. On top of that, they might start showing up in your orbit more than usual, maybe viewing all your stories, commenting on mutual friends' posts where you can see it, or even conveniently being in places you frequent. It's their way of reminding you they still exist in your world, subtly poking at your attention without outright asking for it. This testing phase is not about genuine reconnection at first, it's about reassurance. They want to know that the supply of your attention is still there if they ever decide to fully claim it again. It's an ego check, a way to measure whether they still hold value in your eyes and whether you're still willing to bend toward them like you used to. The tricky part is that these gestures can easily be mistaken for sincere attempts to rebuild the relationship, but in reality, many avoidants are just checking to see if they can still pull the same strings they once could, and how you respond in this stage will tell them exactly how much access they still have to your emotions when you stop chasing an avoidant. One of the most significant shifts that happens inside them is the sense of losing control, and for someone with avoidant tendencies, that can be deeply unsettling. Avoidants like to feel that they are the ones setting the pace, controlling the closeness and distance in the relationship, deciding when to engage and when to pull back. When you were chasing, you unknowingly allowed them to stay in that position of power because they could always count on you to bridge the gap when they created distance. The moment you stop chasing, that power dynamic changes, and it's no longer them dictating the flow, it's you removing yourself from the game entirely. This can trigger a subtle but very real panic in them, even if they won't show it outwardly. In order to regain that sense of control, many avoidants will begin to use manipulation, whether consciously or unconsciously. This could take the form of guilt tripping you, making you feel as though you're pulling away is an act of abandonment or betrayal, even though they were the ones keeping you at arm's length to begin with. They may start making passive-aggressive comments, acting overly cold to provoke a reaction, or sending mixed signals that confuse you enough to re-engage with them. Some will even create small dramas or crises to draw you back in emotionally, because if you're reacting, they feel they have you back in their grasp. Other times, the manipulation is more subtle. They might suddenly withhold attention entirely, not as a genuine boundary, but as a calculated move to make you question yourself and chase again. For them, regaining control isn't necessarily about getting closer to you emotionally. It's about restoring the dynamic where you're the one with the upper hand. Losing that control feels like a threat to their emotional security, and their actions during this stage are often aimed at pulling you back into the familiar pattern where they feel safe. They might even pretend to be completely indifferent, knowing that in the past, your need for reassurance would have pushed you to reach out. By acting this way, they're hoping you'll doubt yourself and try to fix the situation, which puts them back in the driver's seat. The loss of control is especially uncomfortable for avoidants because it forces them to confront the fact that you are capable of walking away and living without their approval or attention. That realization disrupts their usual rhythm and can make them feel exposed, which is why they double down on whatever tactics have worked for them in the past to reestablish that sense of dominance over the emotional exchange between you. When you stop chasing, another shift you'll notice in avoidance is how they suddenly change their behavior, sometimes in ways that feel completely opposite to how they were acting before. This switch can happen for a few different reasons. Sometimes it's because they genuinely start to feel your absence, and it stirs up emotions they didn't expect, and other times because they want to do just enough to pull you back in without actually having to change the way they operate long term. For some avoidants, this switch means becoming unusually attentive. They might start reaching out more frequently, checking in on you, or showing interest in the little details of your life in a way they hadn't before. They could start giving you compliments, asking how your day is going, or even talking about making plans together. On the surface, it can feel like a breakthrough, like maybe they've finally realized your worth and are ready to step up. But often, this sudden attentiveness is more about easing their discomfort with the distance than it is about a deep change in how they connect emotionally. On the other side of the spectrum, some avoidants will go the opposite direction and become even more distant. Instead of increasing contact, they might withdraw completely, making it seem like they've lost interest or moved on. This can be a defense mechanism to protect themselves from vulnerability, because the more they feel like they're losing control or getting out of their comfort zone, the more they retreat. The thing is, whether they become more attentive or more distant, both behaviors are still reactions to your shift. The change in you forces them to respond in some way, even if they don't want to admit it. For those who suddenly act warm and affectionate, it's often a short-term strategy to re-engage you. Once they feel reassured that you're still interested, they may slip back into their old patterns. For those who act colder, it's a way to regain emotional safety by avoiding any possibility of getting hurt or rejected themselves. This switching behavior can be confusing because it makes it harder to read their true intentions. You might start to question whether their new actions are genuine or just another part of the push-pull dynamic that avoidants often create. Either way, the inconsistency is a telltale sign that your absence has impacted them. They're no longer coasting in the same predictable rhythm they had when you were chasing. Your decision to pull back forces them to either step forward or retreat further, but in both cases, it disrupts the comfort zone they had carefully built, and that disruption is what causes these sudden shifts in the way they show up around you. Some avoidants, when you stop chasing, will flip the situation and try to play the victim, making it seem like you've done something wrong by pulling away, even though your decision is often a direct response to their emotional distance. They might start using language that paints them as misunderstood or abandoned, subtly or directly implying that you've hurt them by creating space. This isn't always done in a malicious way. Sometimes it's their way of protecting themselves from facing the truth about their own behavior. If they can shift the narrative so that you're the one at fault, they don't have to take responsibility for their lack of emotional availability. This victim role can show up in different ways. Some avoidants will act hurt or disappointed, making comments about how they never thought you'd change or didn't expect you to pull away like that. Others might bring up all the things they think they've done for you in the past, trying to guilt you into feeling like you owe them more of your attention. In more subtle cases, they might make passive statements about how people always leave them, planting seeds in your mind that make you question if you've become just another person who let them down. What's happening here is an emotional power play. By making you feel guilty or responsible for their feelings, they increase the chances that you'll return to chasing them. Not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to make things right. This can be especially tricky if you're a naturally empathetic or nurturing person, because their hurt tone or sad demeanor can trigger your instinct to comfort them, even when you know they've been the one keeping you at a distance. The victim role also allows them to avoid vulnerability. Instead of admitting they miss you value or are afraid of losing you, they frame the situation as something you've done to them. That way, they can still protect their pride while drawing you back in emotionally. It's a tactic that relies heavily on your emotional investment in them. Because if you didn't care, their attempt to play the victim wouldn't work. The more you care, the more likely you are to feel the sting of their accusations or the weight of their disappointment. What's important to understand is that this reaction isn't necessarily about truth, it's about control. The victim narrative keeps the focus on your actions instead of theirs, and that distraction helps them avoid self-reflection. If you fall into the trap of defending yourself or explaining your reasons for pulling away, you've already re-engaged in the dynamic they're most comfortable with, and that shift puts them back in a position of emotional leverage over you. Your silence has a way of forcing an avoidant to confront things they've been able to avoid for a long time. And one of the biggest impacts is that it strips away the comfortable illusion they've built about their role in your connection. When you were chasing, they could convince themselves that you were always going to be there, no matter how little effort they put in, because you were the one holding the relationship together. But when that constant flow of energy and attention stops, they're left with the reality of their own contribution, or lack of it, and that can be an uncomfortable mirror for them to look into. Without your pursuit, they can't hide behind the usual distractions or push-pull games because now the ball is in their court. The absence of your voice, your presence, your check-in starts to echo louder than they expected. It makes them question what you're doing, who you're spending your time with, and why you're no longer prioritizing them the way you once did. That curiosity can quickly turn into doubt, and that doubt can turn into a subtle fear of losing their place in your life. Some avoidants respond to this by pulling closer, making small but intentional efforts to re-establish the connection, while others respond by withdrawing further, pretending they don't care when in reality they're trying to protect themselves from feeling rejected. But regardless of which way they go, your silence changes the dynamic in a way they can't ignore. It removes the safety net they relied on and puts them in a position where they either have to step forward or risk fading into the background of your life completely. This is often when their true intentions start to show, because without the chase, there's nothing propping up the connection except what they're willing to give on their own. If they value your absence, will push them to act, even if awkwardly or inconsistently. If they were only invested in the validation and control your chasing provided, then your silence will expose that by the way they let the distance grow without making an effort. Either way, the truth comes out. They might still try to mask their feelings, pretending they're unbothered or that they're the one choosing the distance, but the shift inside them is real. They feel the change in power, the loss of constant attention, and the possibility that you're moving on without them. And for someone who has built their emotional habits around avoiding deep connection, that realization can be both unsettling and revealing, because it's the moment they have to decide if keeping you in their life is worth stepping out of their comfort zone.